Boom! What's up, fam? Anthony Johnson here today, co-founder of the Redman Group, founder of 21 Studios, 21 Convention, 22 Convention, the Patriarch Convention, 21 University, 10,000 other things on the internet, including Make Women Great Again. Here today with episode 152 of the Redman Group, Making Texas Badass Again, with special guest to the show, Mr. Jeff Younger. He is an alumni speaker from the 21 Convention Patriarch Edition earlier this year and the 22 Convention by request. I actually had women petitioning me in person to have them speak at the event, add them to the event. That was kind of cool. I'd never seen that at our women's event. It was really neat. Anyway, we'll bring on Jeff here in just a minute. A quick word from our sponsor, 21 Studios. If you are not on our newsletter at 21studios.com, make sure you go check out 21studios.com. Get on the lifeboat. YouTube is run basically by bloodthirsty communists and radical feminists. They don't like anything to do with the manosphere, masculinity, men, anything like that. So if you get on our newsletter, it's a lifeboat, you know. Get early access to videos, special deals on tickets to our events, special announcements, everything like that. And it's a pretty cool new site. We just got built, brand new, 21studios.com. Link in the description, of course. And a lot of cool stuff there you can go check out. So with that commercial out of the way, please let me welcome to the Redman Group, episode 152, Mr. Jeff Younger. Boom. How you doing, sir? Hey, good to have you here, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I want to give a quick plug to 21 Studios. I was really surprised at the intellectual depth at that conference, and the camaraderie among both men and women there was really remarkable. And I enjoyed it, and I was actually sad when it ended. I mean, it was an amazing week.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate not only the support, but the specific comments too. It is very intellectually deep, and that means a lot to me. That's like one of the main points. Let's have really serious, like deep conversations.
Absolutely.
Of this TikTok instant gratification crap that's become so normalized in the recent years. So yeah, it's important. It's where the real work gets done. The real conversations, real change, real action gets inspired.
I mean, if you really want to see people with different points of view engage civilly, but with decisive results, where minds are changed, opinions are changed, and we walk out better. 21 Convention is a place to be for that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I loved the Manosphere and Religion panel we did for the Redman Group coming out soon on YouTube. That was the best episode we probably ever recorded of that show. That was really impressive. Like the depth and the dialogue between an Orthodox Christian like yourself, an atheist, Mormon Christian, Presbyterian pastor, Ken, I think is non-denominational. I'm not sure. So it was really I'd never seen that before. And I loved seeing it. It was awesome. It felt very American to me to see that.
It was very American. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. So let's get some other content here, though. You made a big announcement just the other day, and I had heard about this previously from a little birdie, but you have announced a run for elected office for Congress in Texas.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Well, for example, here we have Howdy, I'm Jeff. This is Meeting Jeff on his site. JeffYoungerForTexas.com, link in the description. Click it, check it out. But tell me about the basics of what's going on here, because you are the first speaker in our history that I know of that's running for elected office in America. So what's going on here?
Well, if you remember, one of the big points during my talk was to try to establish that there's one kind of leadership style, that there's just one way for men to lead, and that's lead by example. People will do what you do. And those that are successful, we're going to all go do what they did. And that's why failure doesn't really hurt us, right? Because the more things we try, the more people are going to succeed. And then we copy those guys and we follow what they do, not what they say. So I just realized that in the courts, I had suffered a major setback. Where they had denied me visitation to my son. Well, they gave me supervised visitation for $600 a visit, but they wouldn't let me pray with my son, and they wouldn't let me change my son out of a dress. So I'm not going to participate in the abuse of my son. So I haven't seen him since the 31st of July.
Let's wind the clocks back here, because most fans are going to know who you are, but just in case they don't, like a new person on the channel. What is the basics of what's happened to you as a father in recent years? Because you've made national headlines in CNN, Fox News, MSNBC.
Yeah.
The governor's jumped in on your case. The attorney general in Texas. Like, you're a major public figure at this point, above and beyond anything I've done. So what's the basics of what's happened with you in your life as a father?
So it just all started when my son was 2 years old, and my ex-wife started trying to transition him to a girl at 2.
Wow.
And by the time he was 3, she had forced me out of the house with false allegations. I was living about a mile up the road, and my son was with me. We had 50-50 possession time. This is before the divorce. We're waiting for the divorce trial. And my son comes to me and, he says, "Mommy says I'm a girl, and I think I'm a girl." And
Whoa.
if you go onto YouTube and just Google "Mommy says I'm a girl," you'll see that video all over the place. And that was my first inkling that she was doing, this to my son. But she was actually teaching him that he was really a girl, that he had a girl's brain and a boy's body. She was putting him in dresses. She was, painting his fingernails and only giving him love when he acted like a girl.
Wow.
And they were reading the I Am Jazz books.
And this woman is a pediatrician, a medical
Yep.
doctor for babies in
Yeah,
Texas.
her name is Ann. Look, I name names. Her name is Ann Georgilis. She's a pediatrician in Coppell, Texas, and everything I'm telling to you has appeared in sworn documents in court. These are all facts.
Wow.
So yeah, she knew how to manipulate all of the licensed care providers, the psychologists, and she got a pediatrician to diagnose my son with gender dysphoria at 4. So I had fought it all that time in the schools and everything, to the point where I'd take my son to school in boys' clothes, and the teacher would give him a dress to wear. The schools were
Wow.
complicit in transitioning my son. The school counselor was complicit in it. The principal fought me every step of the way and denied me information, and the school district refused to admit that even they had violated my parental rights by transitioning my son without my consent. So she took my son, Ann Georgilis took my son to a pediatrician named Dr. Jennifer Pape in Flower Mound, Texas, where I live. And Jennifer Pape diagnosed him with gender dysphoria, even though he doesn't meet the criteria for gender dysphoria. So, the pediatricians want to see that the condition is insistent, consistent, and persistent. Well,
This is also psychological mumbo jumbo because
complete.
there's no blood test, there's no like
Nope.
PCR,
Nope.
positive test. This isn't a virus or something.
No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Basically, what the test is if you engage in stereotypical female behaviors, then they're going to say you're actually a girl and try to transition you. But my son didn't. That's the thing. My son only presents as a girl with his mom. With everybody else at church, with me at his boxing school everywhere, my son presents as a boy. So he's not insistent, consistent, or persistent by any measure. She still did it because anytime you have a leftist medical professional, when you bring a child in that says that they might be another gender, they're going to push them that way. And that's what she did. And that sparked off a massive court battle. And in 2019, we had a big trial. We brought in the top transgender experts on both sides of the issue. And I was awarded 50-50 custody and no child support. But then through a series of corrupt actions in the Dallas County Judiciary, they removed my judge and sent me to the most left-wing judge in Dallas County, who not only won't give me 50-50, but won't even let me see my son.
Wow.
She's allowing Ann Georgilis to transition my son to a girl without my consent or knowledge. I don't even know what medical procedures have been done on my son at this point.
Wow. They're keeping you in the dark, keeping you. That's sick, man.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's important to know too that you spent, an enormous amount of money, like over $1 million with all
Correct.
these experts and judges and attorneys and courts and blah. And
Correct.
you have to, someone was asking in the chat, how the hell can they charge you to see your son? That's not even the worst of what they can do to you as a father. I mean
No.
but that's a
Look,
surprise to most people.
Look, I've had to pay attorneys for the judge. I've had to pay my own attorneys for the judge, and at times the opposing side's attorneys. They'll impose fees on you until you're bankrupt and can't fight anymore. And they're just not used to men who won't stop fighting.
Yep.
And they'll do anything to ramp it up. So now they're abusing my son by not letting him see his father, just in order to break me psychologically so that I'll give in. I'll tell you what this is all about. The reason that I will not attend those supervised visits with my son is that they want to bring my son in a dress, and they want me to play and participate with my son in a dress and participate in his abuse. It's very important for the left that we convert and bend our knees and do what they want us to do. And that's what this is about. This is about making me bend to a leftist, feminist, effeminate agenda. And it's about converting me by force. This
It
is
reminds me
equivalent
of
to the Muslim conquest of Christendom. They want to use a sword at my son's head to convert me to their leftist ideologies, and that's never going to happen.
to compel you. Yeah, it reminds me of Jordan Peterson. He had when he first became a major public figure years ago in Canada for fighting with a lot of this stuff, arguing with it. His big issue was compelled speech. They wanted to compel him to say certain pronouns and stuff.
That's right.
And it reminds me a lot of that, like this psychological submission. It's not enough that they even want to ask you, okay, you ask me whatever you want, and I might do it, I might not. They want to compel you to
Correct.
believe these things, to participate in what you correctly view as child abuse. I mean, this is
Yes.
really disturbing.
Yes. Look, I've brought this issue of child abuse up with my judge many times. In my last big hearing, the judge ruled that I can't even see my son's psychological records. They're even hiding those from me so that I can't, attack these findings in court. They're trying to keep everything secret. And when I brought up the issue of child abuse, the judge just openly laughed in court about it. They don't care that it's child abuse. All this is about securing obedience from a man. I'm supposed to bend my knee to this female judge and do whatever she wants. And that's not going to happen.
The ideology too. I mean, it's ideologically driven. This isn't just
100%.
some random judge. This is a whole collection. This is a percentage of judges and bureaucrats throughout the United States that believe in this crap.
Yes.
Whether it's this or CRT and it's all this other insane garbage.
Yes.
What's amazing?
They don't believe in this. We call it an ideology. Ideology is the logic of ideas. Ideological. So it's really not what we call an ideology, but they don't have their beliefs because of reasons. Mm-hmm. They have their beliefs because they believe this is what makes you a good person. So by saying that this is child abuse and disagreeing with this, to the judge, it's prima facie evidence I'm not a good person and shouldn't be allowed to see my kid. That's how bad it is.
It's completely irrational.
Completely.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad you were able to encapsulate it here in this short amount of time. I know the real story is much more expansive. I've had my own difficulties in life trying to encapsulate, 3 years of relationships or, events into like 3 minutes. And people bitch at you like, oh, it's too long. It's like, come on, man. There's a lot that's happened here.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. I want to comment too and wind it back. A lot of speakers and attendees commented to me about you at the event and in different ways. Jack Donovan publicly, as an example, is a major speaker for us. He wrote a whole post about meeting you and how other guys too. I think Arthur Quinn Lee was another one. Socrates, of course, I was just at his house. You've really stood out not only to the attendees and really engaged with them too. And I appreciate that immensely. That's a role model for me for how speakers need to conduct themselves. And you just did that. I didn't even ask you. You just organically
did everybody that. There. It was a wonderful time.
Yeah. But everybody was really surprised at the level of not only your story, like Jack Donovan described you, for example, as a great father fighting a noble fight. That was his view of you before he met you. But then he met you and you guys were talking about mixed martial arts, fighting, Christian philosophy, other domains of philosophy and religion. Like you're way more than what the media has tried to paint you as. They try to vilify you and stuff as this whatever. But that stood out to me. The way the speakers commented about you too.
Yeah, the media, tries to make you into kind of a one issue person, and they love to take people from Texas and make us into hicks and things like that. Which, to be honest with you, I grew up on a farm and a ranch. I probably qualify as a hick.
Yeah.
But I'm an autodidact, man. I grew up on a farm and a ranch doing for myself. When something needed to be done, I did it myself. When it came time to learn mathematics, I did it myself. When it came time to learn history, I did it myself. I went and bought books. I bought the great books of the Western world, read all of them 3 times. That's my education. I took charge of my own education, and I never felt comfortable leaving my education up to other people. I looked to other people who were educated and did what was successful for them. Great mathematicians, great philosophers, great artists. I taught myself to draw, for example, after I read about how Galileo discovered that the moon was round, and it was because he didn't have a better telescope, but he was trained as an artist, and he understood what he was seeing with the shadows on the moon. and knew that it was a sphere and not a flat spot on a crystal celestial sphere. So I taught myself to draw. I've just copied people who are successful, and I've followed the advice that has been timeless. I haven't followed educational fads. I haven't done that. I've looked back over the entire history of the Western world and said, how did people educate themselves? And that's what I've done for myself. Again, I don't believe in anything other than lead by example. So I look for good examples and I follow them, and I humble myself to their discipline.
Yeah.
In a certain way, I'm having a conversation with the dead here, right? I mean, these are people that are long gone, that left a legacy, and I'm looking at how they operated, and I'm standing on their shoulders, and they're giving me a lift up through their works. But it's painful to self-educate. It's hard to self-educate. But I believe it is a superior approach to things. I mean, even Google, Google doesn't require degrees anymore. They pay non-degreed people more, because if you could teach yourself, you obviously didn't need a teacher. And those people statistically do better at Google. That is the kind of thinking man of action that my father always wanted me to be. And it took me 40 years to get there, but I finally made it.
Yeah. I remember one of your comments in the 21 report, for example, Will Spencer, you wanted basically to see even more action at 21 convention, speeches that focused on action rather than describing and outlining problems. And I found that I love that comment, because I view the convention as very action oriented, and you want to see that even elevated higher. I'm like, wow, that's I appreciate the feedback on that, and then the criticism in some minor sense.
Yeah, I would love to. Look, it takes some convincing to break through this propaganda, to break through the simulated reality that we're fed, and to see the world as it is. It takes some time for people to do that, and we need to help people do that. But we have a lot of people now who have been red pilled, and they see through that simulation. They see the world more as it really is. And I think these people need to start going out into the world and changing it.
Yes.
And it won't happen by describing problems. It will happen by thinking of problems as things that need to be overcome. And how are we going to overcome them? And that's going to include rhetoric. We're going to need people who can think clearly, people who can communicate clearly, people who are in different situations and can do things that others can't. If you're in a job that pays $500,000 a year as a CEO, you're going to be constrained in ways that somebody like me, who's a small business owner, just isn't going to be constrained by that.
Same.
So we need to start using all of our strengths. Our people with money need to step forward. Our people who are lawyers need to step forward. Our people who are doctors and have professional certifications need to step forward. And we need to start weaponizing our views and changing things. The fundamental aspect of masculinity is that it's something to be feared and respected. We can't be asked to be respected if we're not feared.
Yeah. Listening to your 21 report as well as now a little bit, but especially your interview with Will Spencer, I almost titled it like the Malcolm X of the manosphere, just because like how savage you were. Well, the way you dealt with the bank, there was like a bank issue, and you went to the president, and I was like, this mofo was like, Malcolm X up in here, man.
Yes.
Like,
well, this may surprise you, but I left home at a young age, and I went to high school. My last 2 years of high school in Houston, Texas, in a school that's long been shut down because of the criminality at the school. So they had to shut it down and break it into 2 schools. Wow. But when I was there, it was predominantly black high school. And one of the first books I read when I got there was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And, Malcolm X was also an autodidact. He didn't know how to read when he went into prison, and he learned how to read. He learned how to write. And I'll dare you to listen to Malcolm X and some of the interviews that he gave. And I think you'll find that you'll be hard pressed during his time to find anybody more intelligent or articulate than Malcolm X.
Wow.
And Malcolm X is a great example of somebody who led by example. And there was only one way to stop Malcolm X, and that's the way they did it. They had to kill Malcolm X because he was going to achieve his goals one way or another.
Damn.
Yeah, Malcolm X is a good man to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same.
I copied that.
Yeah.
That's how I became educated, by copying Malcolm X's self-education program.
One of the things I love about our speakers at 21 Convention and the other events, 22 and Patriarch and all that, Michael Foster, for example, one of the pastors that spoke at the event, he said that I have a great respect for men who are all in with their convictions and their beliefs. You know, you figure out what you believe, you figure out why you believe it, how you believe it, what you believe, and then you go. You don't hold back, you don't pussyfoot it, you don't playing
Yeah,
around. And I think that's one of the reasons you fit so well at the events, and not only at the events, but within the speaker group of the other speakers that we were basically colleagues at the event and fellow speakers, is you're at that same level. You're 100%. That doesn't mean you know
yeah,
everything in the world. You have a level of humility to understand that there's an infinite amount of knowledge for you to obtain right before you die,
yeah,
and but you're all in the meantime with what you currently have at your disposal. And I operate the same way. Like, I figure out what I believe and I go 100%.
yeah.
And I really admire that about you and respect it. And I think
Thanks,
more
brother.
men
And I
should
thought
have this.
everybody was like that. You know, I had a conversation afterwards. We went over to Socrates' house. We sat around a campfire.
Yep.
I'm sitting there talking to Jack Donovan, and he taught me a lot of stuff I didn't understand about the pickup side of this stuff and why that has a place and how it got here. Because I didn't really go through that, with him, and I never had that issue with fitting into a society that had abandoned me. I was kind of before that really happened. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, that was a really massively important thing for me to learn. And that's
Mhm.
just an example of the kind of just eye-opening things I got from the other speakers.
Yeah.
It's probably the most important intellectual interactions that I've had in the last 30 years, and I'm only 56.
Damn. Yeah, I can directly relate to that as a young man in America, 33, a millennial. You
Yeah.
know, the level of emasculation that millennials and Zoomers have gotten is insane. It's incredible. What your son's going through is I think the final conclusion of that.
Hmm.
But I mean, I'm older than your son, obviously, by a considerable amount. But
Right.
Zoomers aren't 18, 19-year-old Zoomers. They're
Right.
what your son's 9. I mean, it's I even saw it when I was in high school. This is the way the sports teams operated and stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
I had an older sister, and I got to meet a lot of the football players when I was growing up, and like even just in like athletics and high school football and stuff, you would see the changing standards over time. It got less and less intense. They banned 2-a-day practice, for example, for about 5, 6 years. They brought it back when I was a senior, thankfully.
Wow.
But these are the things that even as I didn't have the intellectual capacity to describe what I was seeing, but I knew what I was seeing was wrong, and it
Yeah.
was concerning, and I didn't understand why, but I knew I didn't like it. I was like, I want to be tough. I want to play football. I don't want to see the team get softer. That doesn't make sense to me, even as a kid. 14, 15
Yep.
years old, and I
Yeah,
can
I've
only
seen it with
imagine.
my own sons. I remember I went to have lunch with my sons, and then hung out with them at recess at their school. This is when they're in third grade,
Mhm.
and my son at one point, Jude. My sons are James and Jude. I named them after the brothers of Jesus. So Jude, starts telling me that he's learned how to climb up walls the way I had showed him, and I showed him how to vault over walls. So he just in the cafeteria runs over to a window and vaults up onto the window ledge. The
Damn.
teachers went absolutely crazy, like insane.
Wow.
Like, and I'm like, I don't know what your problem is. The kid's just standing on a brick ledge. Like, what's the big deal? But
Yeah.
come on, I got him down and everything was fine. Then we went out to recess, and Jude wants to show me that he's been practicing how to tackle and his jujitsu takedown. So he starts taking, and he can do it. He starts taking these kids down, and then he gets punished for that. He almost got expelled for that. Like, you can't
Wow.
touch people when they play tag. They don't even let them touch each other. So
How
it's
how
like,
do you how do you tag them?
I have no idea. I guess you get close enough and say you got them. I guess
That's
you believe it. I have no
stupid.
idea. It's
That
bizarre.
Yeah, that's
It's
bizarre and
bizarre.
stupid as shit.
And I remember we used to go out to the park, and we have this thing, in my house. It's called rugby rules. Anything below the collarbone is a fair blow. Like,
Mm.
somebody kicks you, punches you, that's fair. Just hit them back. So my boys will go out all the time, and they have body punch fights, and they kick each other's legs, and they're trying to trip each other and throw each other down and wrestle. It's kind of MMA with no face punches, right?
Mm.
And so my sons love doing this. I've had parents call the police on me at the parks.
Wow.
I mean, they've never seen kids roughhouse, apparently. And that's when there's parents there like, my kids, we go to the park, there's nobody there. There's no kids at the parks. I
Wow.
mean, we're alone there most of the time. Kids don't even
It's
get
nuts.
outside.
Dude, I went to Poland we had our convention in Poland
Yeah,
in 2019. Socrates came out, about 15 speakers. And when I was there earlier, I was preparing for the event a few months beforehand. I got to see a lot of the culture in the capital, Warsaw, Poland. There's a lot of parks, a lot of outdoor
yeah.
parks. It was a little bit cold, but not crazy.
All right.
And there's kids, families everywhere, kids everywhere. Not only so it's the opposite of what you're seeing, in America and all that, but also there was like these kids at some points that would start fighting each other, like bare knuckle.
Sure.
Just and they
Yeah.
were not old. They were maybe like 10, 11, so
Right.
almost a teenager, but not quite. But
Yeah.
these are like real fights these little kids were getting into, and the parents were not doing nothing to stop it.
No,
They
you
would,
can't.
I think, they were keeping an eye on it. I guess they were like around
Yeah.
it. Nobody was freaking out. Nobody was calling the cops. And the reality is, I went out to bars and stuff there too, and these nightclubs. There's fights every night in
Yeah.
Poland
That's
because it's
normal.
just part of the culture. And
Yeah.
nobody pulls knives, nobody pulls guns. They just
Yeah.
fight, and then it ends, and then that is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's
That's
a
what
very
it is.
masculine, very physical culture, and
Eastern
it's
Europe is one of the few places where you still have traditional Western masculinity.
mm,
I know Serbia is the same way,
yep,
and I know Czech Republic is still like that.
yeah,
Um, and I had a friend of mine. We opened an office in Serbia, and I had a friend of mine got invited out to a barbecue with a bunch of business people. They just stripped off their shirts and just started wrestling in the front yard. They wouldn't let him. They made him wrestle. Like he had to wrestle.
wow,
And so there's like a 60 some odd year old like national champion that was beating everybody and just tossed my guy around for about 30 minutes. He came back with these big bruises and he loved it. It's just what men do. That's what men do.
yeah,
And it's just think about it. Like people think that what I'm doing to my sons by letting them roughhouse is illegal. I mean, it's crazy.
it's sick, yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
There's a real sickness in the culture that is we're focusing here on specific issues for what's happened in your life and your son, but the sickness, this woke sickness or whatever you want to call it, wokeism or radical feminism and all stuff, it is so expansive, like a cancer that just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Mhm.
And I know it's been going on for a long time, at least since the 1960s, for example, but it feels like really the past 10, 12 years, it's really gotten like hyper radicalized, hyper in overdrive, basically.
Yes.
I guess since the Obama years, I guess once he got in for a couple of years, maybe that's part of what kicked it off, or was orchestrated. Who knows? It's hard to know these things.
I think it is. I think that there's the whole concept of toxic masculinity is just the kind of rationalization for the destruction of the male.
Yep.
If you look at, in politics, you look at how politics has changed from, say, the time of Eisenhower to now. It's become extremely effeminate. I mean, you can't even use you can't even say, I'm going to target my opponent with the following, questions. Target your opponent. Now everybody's going to say you're being violent. It's just gotten to absolutely ridiculous extent on the use of language.
Well, hang on. The Speaker of the House has banned the use of gendered pronouns, right?
That's right.
Mom, dad, like stuff like that. I mean, that happened like a few months ago. That's
That's
just
right.
it's
That's right.
insane.
And it inherently, when you make things neutral like that, it becomes effeminate, not masculine, just
That's right.
inherently. Because the whole you could probably describe masculinity as a kind of desire to be at the top of a hierarchy. So you're always trying to be different, do something different, to be the best. And if you're going to make everything neutral, that's never possible. So it's just inherently effeminate.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example of this in a recent speech that I gave. So I went to Fort Worth to speak at a group, and it was very large. There was probably 300 people there. And this woman came up to me. Never seen her before. Don't really even know her name still. She had a name tag on, but it was in cursive. I couldn't really read it very well. And she said, I just want to let you know that sometimes stepfathers are better fathers than the fathers themselves. So I just said, ma'am, you're just an anti-father bigot, and you don't belong in the Republican Party. You don't believe in the traditional family, and why don't you leave? And the Republican men around me really didn't know what to do. I mean, you could literally see their balls pulling back up into their abdomen and their dicks shrinking to like toddler size.
They're like alpha male alert.
Know what to do? I mean, I said, ma'am, you're not gonna come over here and badmouth fathers. They're the bedrock of this entire society. And if you're going to be an anti-father bigot, just get out. You don't belong here. This is for conservatives, not you.
Yeah.
Right.
This is for conservative, not you.
You just
I love it.
You just see, like, in probably her entire life, nobody ever told her no.
That's right. Yep.
And I mean, we have a real problem with that. And part of that comes from, like, if you look at the Republican Party, all the precinct chairs are female. Most of the county chairs are female. It's because they have time. They can volunteer their time for these unpaid positions. So they wind up being very powerful within the party apparatus. And it becomes inherently effeminate. I had another situation. I was over in Frisco, Texas, talking to a group. And we have a governor candidate. He's a real nice guy. I like him. He's been a big supporter of my son. He's a genuinely good man. His name is Alan West.
Oh, yeah.
I
know Alan.
Yeah. He's running for the Texas governor. I really like him. And this woman came up, and we had an incident where the Dallas police harassed his wife and falsely arrested her for DWI when she blew a 0 at the scene. She blew a 0, and they still arrested her for DWI and kept her in jail. This was just to harass him. This is just the Democratic establishment harassing Alan West's wife. And this is a grandmother, right? So as you might imagine, Alan West, being a combat veteran, alpha male, was pretty pissed off about this, and he started demanding apologies from the police department. So this woman comes over to me at the speaking event after this happened and says, I really like Alan West, but, I don't think he was very statesmanlike in the way he was approaching that. And I just started laughing. I had a friend next to me, and he was trying to calm her down. And finally she said, well, you look like you have something to say to me. And I said, oh, man, listen, I said, you're talking about Alan West, who's a combat man. This guy led a brigade combat team in Iraq, right, for multiple tours. This is a man who's been in bayonet combat with the enemy. I mean, he's killed people face to face with blades. And you're telling me that you want him to talk like he's an effete Yale graduate with estrogen count higher than yours?
Yep.
I mean, this man is a combat veteran. He speaks like one. I personally like it, and I think your desire for change in Texas, to simultaneously have change and an effeminate executive, aren't going to get what you want. If you want change, you probably need a man like that. So maybe you should not tell men how to talk, just like we don't tell you women how to talk.
It's tone policing is what it is.
I'm not putting up with that tone policing, man.
Yeah.
It's very important to a certain segment of the electorate. I mean, that's what hurt Trump, right?
Yeah. I love the way Trump talks. I mean, it was polarizing. I think it helped. Some people loved it, some people disliked it and hated it. I mean, I think more often than not, people like it. Whether or not they're going to be vocal about it themselves is a different issue. I will be, because I'm very strongly in favor of it.
And I can tell you also from a kind of from a different perspective. Like I'm running as a Republican, so I have to worry about these things. We have never needed conservative women more than now. Because the male vote is the bedrock vote for the Republican Party and conservative candidates. The swing vote are female votes, right? In my state, Beto almost beat Ted Cruz for Senate, right? And that was all because of the female vote. The male vote didn't change even 1%. That all was because of the female vote change. We need conservative women who understand the value of patriarchy and masculinity to convince their fellow women to change the way that they think about politics in order to get the kinds of families and the kinds of social structures that they know are good for their kids. And I'm sorry, but so many Republican women are not willing to accept responsibility for that. They want the effects of their labor without responsibility for achieving the goal. Yep. And when I hold them accountable for it and say, look, women today are basically, politically, they're not listening to what men are saying. We're depending on you women to do this, and we give you money in the Republican Party for all these Republican women's clubs in order to do outreach to women, and you're not succeeding. Yep. And they don't like to hear that they're accountable for that, but we're going to have to start doing that as men. We're going to have to hold women accountable.
So you would say we need to do a lot more mansplaining, basically.
A lot more mansplaining. And in fact, mansplaining needs to be the norm.
Yep.
It needs to be the norm.
I love it, man. We're in a lot of same pages here.
Yes.
Let's get into some of the issues. I don't want, we're running out of time. We've got about 25, 30 minutes left. I really want to get into the issues you have listed on your site as a
Okay.
candidate now for public office.
Yeah.
So, actually, let's go. Before we do that, there's one more thing that I saw. This I loved. I put this in a newsletter where I, announced that you're running for Congress. On your website, you said those who have been harmed by government should serve in government. They
Right.
know why the government must be strictly limited. But it's the
Right.
beginning. It's the beginning part here. I love. I'll say it again for anyone listening on audio, like on Apple and stuff. Those who have been harmed by government should serve in government. Brilliant. This is like the best part of your campaign, dude. This needs to be, in my opinion, everywhere because this makes a shit ton of sense and it's really easy to understand. And it makes me curious, if I can opine here, about what happened to you, which I know, but it's amazing, man. I really love that part.
Thanks, man. Look, man. This is the, I've often said women talk a lot, but they don't communicate much. Men don't talk much, but communicate a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is just directly saying that credentials don't matter. It doesn't. Your credentials are irrelevant to how well you'll do in government. We've seen that time and time again, right?
Mm-hmm.
People that do good in government are people that have suffered from the government, and they know in their own lives why it has to be limited. And those people typically come in, they get the change that they want, and they leave. And somebody else who's been harmed by government needs to come in behind them and fix other problems. And that's the crucial point I'm trying to make there.
Do you agree?
Credentials.
On this note, do you agree with the old saying by President George Washington that government is like fire? I think that's the correct quote because it can be very useful. Obviously, it can also be very dangerous and can kill you.
100%.
Yeah, because that's what this feels like. This feels like a modern rendition of that. Like this is who should run for the government. I agree. I've never even seen this before. This is a really brilliant way to put it, man. But yeah, you've been burned by the fire. Yeah, and you know firsthand how dangerous this government is.
I know what it can do to you, and I'm going to go in there and try to stop it from doing it to you. Because if I stop it for me, I'll stop it for you too.
Yeah. Yep. So let's get into the issues.
Sure.
This is your issues page. JeffYoungerForTexas.com/issues. Everybody Google it, JeffYoungerForTexas.com. So right at the top, let's go through the way it listed. Actually, let's start here at this one because I thought this one was the most interesting. One of the most interesting. Well, let's see. Where is it? Here it is. So in my view, in my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, your number one issue legislatively is banning transgender child abuse. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. It's the number 3 priority for the Texas Republican Party, but it will be my number 1 priority.
Yeah, that makes sense given what you've been through completely.
Yep. And there's some things that I talk about that you won't hear other people talk about on this issue. First of all, parents have to have a right to all psychological records for their children. The way that children have been transitioned without their parents' knowledge, it turns out in all the 50 states, parents don't have a right to see a child's medical or psychological records. The doctor or psychologist can assert a right of privacy for the child against the parent's right to see it.
Wow.
Which means they can be telling your child anything and doing anything to your child, and you don't know what they're doing. So that needs to change, and that will end secret transitioning of children in schools, because what they're doing is they're using school counselors, and the school counselor exerts the privilege and they don't inform the parents. That's how they're getting away with it. So that needs to stop. The other thing is I've been threatened, with this in my case. Let's say that she successfully gets my son onto chemical castration drugs. These are the most expensive drugs sold in the United States. These drugs, I have to pay for those. It's right now under Texas law, paying for those drugs is considered a form of medical child support. And the state will put me in jail if I don't pay for that. And I'm not going to pay for that. So I've been planning to go to jail for a long time. So we need to change that in our statutes and make an exception for child support on these procedures. It'll be the first exception to child support in Texas history, but it has to be done. It'll also set a pattern for other things that child support should not be allowed for. Yeah. And finally, we just need to flat out outlaw all these procedures and remove all liability insurance protection from doctors who do them.
Yep. I wish I lived in Texas just so I could vote for you. Maybe I'll move there for a year or two just so I can vote for you. Yeah.
Hey, I got a spare bedroom. You can put that as your address.
Nice. Yeah, I love to. You not only so you have the issue listed here very clearly. You have an explanation of what's going on here, and then you
Yeah.
have I wish more politicians did this. You have a very clear itemized list here, like you just
I
went
lay out a
through.
legislative program for most of these issues, and I
Yep.
intentionally did that against all the consultants who've told me not to do that. I want my
Yeah.
constituents to know exactly what I plan to do when I get in, and I want my constituents to come tell me where I'm wrong or where I could make it better. But I
How
have a
dare you? How
specific
dare
plan.
you? You're supposed to be a snake and go back on all your promises. What are you doing?
Yes,
Come on,
yes,
man.
and there's a lot of ways to do that. I've learned all about how that works in the Texas legislature, all the tricks they pull,
Yeah.
and they're not going to be able to pull those tricks on my bills. I can assure you. You can ask Stephanie Click, Representative Stephanie Click here in Texas, who is probably going to be voted out of office because I exposed her. You can ask Dustin Burrows, who's facing a real tough primary because he killed my bill through some pretty slimy things he did in the calendar committee.
Yeah.
So I know all those tricks, and I'm going to be kicking their ass if they try it again.
Good. Yeah, I imagine every state has all these little
They
strategic
do.
little tips and tactics and
Yes.
maneuvers they can do to nuke
Yes.
things. Let's go down here though. I think this one will be interesting, and then we'll get through all of them in a minute. But
All right.
this one caught my attention. I love the way you worded this: protect the institution of the family, and this seems to deal a lot with family court issues. So, can you describe this issue to me?
Yeah. So we don't normally think of family issues as legal issues that can be affected by statutes, but it turns out that there are powerful laws that incentivize the breakup of families and almost outlaw or prevent judges from allowing children to have equal access to both parents in divorce. And this is a legislative program to remedy that. So, first of all, a lot of people don't know this, but in most states, interlocutory judgments, which are the judgments that happen between when a lawsuit is filed to the time there's a final judgment, in Texas for a divorce, that could be 2.5, 3 years. So the judge issues what's called temporary orders. And there's a whole set of things that happen. Somebody will say, well, this person shouldn't be allowed to see the children, like in my case, and they take away my possession time. I can only have supervised possession. I'm not allowed to appeal that to a higher court. There's no supervision on the lower courts on these judgments that happen in the middle of a trial, where you're talking about 3 years in the life of a child is a long time in their development.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, but can you repeat that part because that part sounded really important? You said there's no supervision on lower family courts
No, family
by higher
courts are not
courts,
supervised by the higher courts because you cannot appeal the judgments that happen between the institution of the divorce and the final judgment, which could be up to 3 years.
and
They're not appealable.
that's not normal compared to civil court and criminal court. You're
Normal
saying,
civil courts, they're all appealable.
yeah, wow,
Right? So the family courts operate with a level of impunity that other judges don't, and the judges in family court know it and make great use of it.
wow,
So we want to make all of those interlocutory judgments appealable, and that will bring higher court scrutiny on family court decisions. And we've had some really terrible ones here in Texas. You know about mine.
yep,
Um, we had a Republican woman judge here in my county. Had a divorce. A woman had an affair with a man, and it broke the family up. The mother took the daughter. The mother was then killed 6 months later in a car accident, and the judge gave visitation to the boyfriend who broke up the marriage. So this father has to hand over his daughter to the man who broke up the marriage and stole his wife every other weekend.
that's insane.
That went to the Texas Supreme Court, and they just said that's ridiculous. You can't do that. But that was a circuit court judge here in my county who's a Republican woman, and it took three legal foundations and over $1 million to get that to the Texas Supreme Court to get that ruling, because typically those are not appealable. So they had to go up on what's called a writ of mandamus with a super high standard of proof. But the Supreme Court was so incensed by that ruling that they accepted it. 99% of those are simply not even looked at.
Wow.
So that's how bad this problem can be with unsupervised judges. The other thing is temporary orders aren't temporary in family court. So I've been under temporary orders for about 9 years now.
Wow.
So those temporary orders have put me under unconstitutional gag orders. They've at various times restricted my travel outside the United States, restricted my travel outside of Texas. at various times have restricted my ownership of firearms. Like every single constitutional right you can imagine has been curtailed by these temporary orders.
And I want to make it clear: are you still under a gag order
I'm
officially?
still under gag order right now. This talk I'm giving to you is totally illegal right now.
Wow.
I'm not allowed to talk about anything about transgender issues. I'm not allowed to even tell you my son's a boy. That's all illegal. And I've said it time and time again. That's an unconstitutional gag order. I don't follow unconstitutional laws, orders, or mandates anymore. I encourage everybody to stop doing that. And I've challenged the judge time and again to put me in jail for it. And I have a writ of a habeas corpus already prepared. We'll just take that to the Texas Supreme Court and see if she's right or I'm right. And I know I'm right.
Yeah.
So instead of holding me accountable for that, she took my kids away from me. She's willing to punish my kids because I'm speaking out about what these courts are doing. So that's an example of temporary order abuse, which goes on all the time in these family courts. So temporary orders need to be limited to 3 months, and that's it. No more.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing is the best interests of the child doctrine. So it sounds great. All the 50 states have a statute which says that the family courts must always rule in the best interest of the child. But here's the problem. There's no objective standard for what the best interests of the child are. If
Bingo.
I, as an Orthodox Christian, have a certain idea about what is in the best interest of my sons, a Sunni Muslim will have very different ideas about what's in the best interest of his sons. And, a Buddhist would have very different ideas, and a radical, materialist atheist would have very different ideas. So practically what this means is that the judges have interpreted these statutes to mean that the judge gets to decide what's in the best interest of the child. So what happens in family court is the court raises your kids. They just make you do all the work and pay for it. They make all the decisions.
I heard this. I was reading about this issue not long ago, a few weeks ago, by another speaker. She co-wrote a book with her aunt.
Really?
Suzanne Venker with Phyllis Schlafly.
Phyllis Schlafly is amazing.
Yeah. Suzanne Venker is
I'm a member of the Eagle Forum. I love Phyllis Schlafly's organization. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, her niece spoke at 22 with you. That was Suzanne Venker.
Yes. Yeah, I got to meet her. Yeah, she's amazing.
But I was reading the book that they put together, I don't know if it was 10, 15 years ago before she died, and they were talking about this exact issue, best interest of the child. And the way they outlined it was really illuminating to me as well. It was what you're putting here. They said that basically the only time in any court in America and even beyond that in Canada and the West, this is the only time they don't judge according to the rule of law is with this best interest of the child stuff. It has nothing. It has nothing to do with the way judges normally operate, which is according to common law and case law and precedent, and it's all which is consistent for civil law and criminal law, right? But it's for family law they just do this random subjectivist crap, then it ends. And like you're saying, the court ends up raising your kid, and you have to pay for it.
That's right. That's how it works. Yeah, and if you go to look, I go to these continuing education courses that judges have to take. The judges brag that they don't follow the law, that they follow the best interest of the child, not the law. They brag about it. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. The legal protections that obtain in family court simply don't apply to you. I mean, in a normal civil court, they don't apply in family court. And so it's a huge problem. And so you could characterize everything I'm trying to do here as trying to give people in family court the same protections you'd have if you had a contract dispute or you had, any civil dispute. All those constitutional protections simply aren't there in family court.
Yeah.
And
you're trying to
have no supervision from the
you're trying to bring what are otherwise normal objective standards to this court system.
Correct. I'm just saying operate like a normal civil court.
Yep. How dare you?
Yeah. I mean, like our Supreme Court has said temporary orders can only be 3 months for normal civil courts.
Yeah.
Let's just do that in family courts.
Yep.
So there's a lot of issues like that. And, one thing that COVID showed us, because all of the family court hearings have been online because the courts weren't open. They've shown us that these courts can operate perfectly fine being recorded with video open to the public. And one of the problems we've had is these courts are operating in secret.
Yeah.
People don't know what's happening and they're outraged when they see what is happening. So I want to require every county to put video cameras with audio in every family court and allow everyone to inspect the operations of the courts that they pay for.
Yeah. That sounds good to me, man. We need you in Florida, man, when you're done in Texas.
Yes.
Let's go through some more issues here. I mean, there's a lot of major ones you put here, and I have some other questions as well.
Sure.
So you have to secure the border and secure free, fair elections.
Yes.
These are two. These seem to be pretty high up the list, obviously. You talk to me about these? I mean, Texas is a border state too, obviously, with Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big issue. You know, I really was not happy with the institution of the Department of Homeland Security. It created a centralized authority to secure the homeland, and that's not the way we should have done this. All the states have different ideas about what security is. You know, a landlocked state like Kansas does not have the same kind of problems that Texas has. Texas has a big border with Mexico. Florida has a very large sea border. We just have two different problems, right, that we need to deal with. And we should decentralize homeland security and let the states take care of it. But in Texas, we've had a problem. The federal government has failed to exercise its responsibility to defend the borders of this country in Texas. We have 1 million illegal migrants flooding into Texas. We've had, a lot of people don't know this, but we've had major military level incursions from narco traffickers from Mexico. I mean, major ones like machine gun fire coming across the border. We've had raids. We've had machine gun raids across the border. We've had all kinds of problems. This is a major issue here in Texas, and it affects everybody in this state. So under Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, if a state is under an actual invasion, the state can assume authority to repel the invasion. And I'm going to give the governor authority to do that in statute. And I want to make it very clear to the governor that if he fails to secure the border under that statute, it's an impeachable offense. Because there's some people in Texas, even conservatives, saying, I don't know if that's an impeachable offense. Okay, well then let's write a law with the sense of the legislature. Sense of the legislature is very important in our legal system in Texas. We will write a sense of the legislature with the law saying it is absolutely impeachable to fail to protect the borders of this state. And a lot of people don't know that Texas was an independent country before it came into the Union.
Yep.
So it came into the Union by treaty. So Texas has a special treaty relationship with Mexico, an independent treaty relationship that precedes our relationship with the U.S. government, and it still exists and is legally binding. So we can actually establish embassies in foreign countries, for example. And we have an embassy in Mexico, and we have formal diplomatic relations with Mexico. And we have the ability to cooperate with the the Mexican military in ways the federal government actually cannot do. And so we need to make use of that. We also have a lot of economic leverage over in Mexico. We constructed the entire northern power grid in Mexico. Texas operates that. We have a lot of economic leverage we can bring to bear. The bottom line is we cannot allow an invasion of 1 million people into our country, and we don't know who they are. We don't know what they're doing, and it can't happen. And, you know, I think, you know, Milton Friedman, you know, said this best. It said you can have open borders or you can have a welfare state, but you can't have both. All these people that come here use our hospitals for free. They use our schools for free. And it's a huge burden on this state. I think the Texas Attorney General's office said it's $59 billion a year to this state on the low. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's not reimbursed federal. That's not reimbursed by the federal government. That's all on Texas.
Yep. Let's talk about secure, free, and fair elections.
Well, a lot of people, you know, are unhappy about, you know, how we do elections in the United States. I mean, I think it's an absolute disgrace that you can have more secure elections in Afghanistan and Iraq than you can have here, and that Americans ran more secure elections in Iraq than they ran in the United States. I mean, you had to show ID in Iraq. They actually put a physical mark on your body that lasted for 48 hours so you couldn't return and vote again. All sorts of things like that. And we don't do that here. We have a huge problem in Texas in lots of counties. And there's a dirty secret in the Republican Party. We've had Republicans fix primary elections in this state.
Wow.
All right. So the basic idea is to make it easier for eligible voters to vote, particularly handicapped and elderly, and require identification, outlaw any form of ballot harvesting or drive-through voting, and allow unfettered observation of what is happening at the polls. And right now, that's not happening. So they're blocking poll watchers from seeing how things are counted and so forth. The other thing is, like in my own county, we just took 60,000 ineligible voters off of the rolls. 60,000 off the rolls. That's enough to swing any election in this county.
Yep.
So these are just common sense things, and people, some people find these somewhat controversial, but these are the OECD, international requirements for elections. These are worldwide standards, and they're lower standards than we used in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah. They all make common sense to me, but I guess that common sense is
Yeah.
running pretty thin these days.
Yeah.
Yep. I do want to get to one that was more personally interesting to me, and that's protect the right to keep and bear arms. So where do you stand on gun rights, and what do we have here in this part of the platform?
So I'm first of all, I'm a Second Amendment guy. I don't believe that the Second Amendment is just for self-defense. I believe the Second Amendment was put there to ensure that there's always a check and balance on the government from the people themselves. An armed population cannot be oppressed by government by definition. So that's the main reason for the Second Amendment. But I also don't believe that simply having the right is enough. If you want that right to be effective, you need to have your citizenry trained in marksmanship and armor skills. They need to be able to use their weapons and maintain their weapons, and that serves as a powerful check on a tyrannical government.
Nice.
People may laugh at this and talk about tyrannical government, but let me tell you, the federal government came into Texas and shut down our coal plants, and then when we had this massive outage during the winter, blamed it on us.
Yep.
The federal government shut it down and killed our elderly in the winter by forcing us to shut down coal plants. So there are real things that happen, like very serious things. And so I think the other thing is, if you ever have a prayer of reestablishing federalism in this country, where the states, have actual rights in the government, then you're going to have an armed population in those states. So what I want to do is remove all taxation from firearms, ammunition, and gun range fees. If you're going to buy a gun and go train with them at a gun range, you shouldn't have to pay the government to do that, because it's a public good, just like food in the schools. There should be no taxes on that. I also am very upset that we'll give Tesla, Walmart, and Amazon all these sweetheart deals to come here. Why aren't we giving those to gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers? Because Texas needs an industrial infrastructure to produce armaments. And that will produce a huge fear in the federal government to come after Texas in the future. And if Texas wants to maintain its independent status as a true state in a union and not just become a province of a federal bureaucracy, then we're going to need to be able to produce our own armaments. So I want to give gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers the same sweetheart deals that we've given these other big companies.
That would boost jobs in your local economy in your state anyway.
Big time. And I also propose that we create our own Texas civilian marksmanship program. There's already a federal civilian marksmanship program, which encourages gun safety and also holds marksmanship competitions. I want to create a Texas civilian marksmanship program, which is focused more on tactical shooting, maybe based on the IDPA or IPSC rules. And it would encourage schools, private schools, public schools, to participate in pistol and rifle competitions and to develop among the citizenry skill in using firearms. If you want to have an effective Second Amendment, people need to actually have guns and be skilled in their use. And that's what I plan to try to achieve.
Let's move to medical freedom for all. I love the way this has been, again, written here, medical freedom. What is going on with medical freedom here? Well, I like medical freedom.
I mean, for the first time in history, right, the federal government has asserted a right to force you to take medications or to force a medical procedure on you. And in Texas, we simply don't accept that. And I love your governor too. Governor DeSantis has just said the federal government doesn't have that right. And this is a great example of a federal overreach that just needs to be nullified by the states. Okay, OSHA can tell us what to do. The CDC can tell us what to do. But I'm going to quote a famous person in history and say, how many divisions does the CDC have? How many divisions does OSHA have? Just how are they going to make us do that exactly?
Yeah.
And we need to start taking that attitude. How are you going to make me do that, chump? So I'm going to really push to have a very, very clear law. We have a law, but it's kind of wishy-washy, and I want to improve it to make sure that there can never be a medical mandate ever. The government cannot force you to do anything with your body that you don't want to do. And it has no authority to ever force any citizen into unwanted medical procedures. And to me, this is just a basic right of the citizenry. If you don't have this right, I don't see how you have any other rights.
You're a slave. Yeah, they own
You're
your
a
body
slave.
like a farm
100%.
animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing they did is our governor shut down our churches.
Wow.
Now,
And he's a Christian.
I never thought I'd see in Texas, but
he's a
people
Christian.
complied with this. Okay.
Your governor's a Christian too?
He's a Christian, yes.
Wow.
And I never thought people would comply with this. So we're going to have to make that an impeachable offense as well. And we're going to have to make it impeachable even if they're complying with federal mandates. Because right now, the weasel language lets them say they can close them down again if the federal mandates include it. And I also want to, it's not on here, but I want to include these protections for businesses. Government has no right to tell you that you can't transact business with your fellow citizens. If you want to go sell something, if you want to set up shop and sell food or anything else with somebody, government has no authority to stop you from doing that. That's a straight up 10th Amendment issue. I know lawyers don't like to hear these 10th Amendment arguments because they lose in the federal courts. Well, in Texas, we don't really care. I just ask the federal courts, how many divisions do you have? How are you going to make us follow it?
Yeah. I've always thought it's pretty dumb to ask the federal courts to limit the power of the federal government. They are the federal government. They are the federal government.
Like, you're right. And this is a fundamental issue that I'm glad you brought this up because I really can't have these conversations often. The system as constituted cannot work, right? You're basically asking the federal government to limit itself. And then when you have federal, like you'll have these committee hearings in the federal government. These people don't get punished if they lie. People aren't put under oath like they are in a criminal court where if they perjure themselves, they go to jail. We don't have these kinds of protections. So the only way this system can work is radical decentralization. It has to be a return to federalism. Mm-hmm. California wants to have a certain way of life. Texans need to say, that's your business. But we don't want that here. Maine wants a certain way of life. Go for it. Florida, you got your whole thing. Do it. And maybe groups of states will cooperate. I could definitely see Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana forming kind of a Gulf Coast, caucus within the states. We have similar interests that we should take care of. But it should not be up to the federal government to be bossing us around the way they do.
Yep.
And so really the issue is radical decentralization of government back to the states.
Well, not only bossing us around, but bossing us around and determining how much they can boss us around. It's it's like getting a credit card and then determining your own credit limit. I'll just take half $500 million.
Like
just do whatever the fuck I want.
That it can, the CDC just determines that it can control aircraft operations and require masks. It can just do that.
Yeah.
In Texas and I think in Florida, we don't really think they have that authority, and we're probably not going to do that here.
Yep.
So they have to call out federal police in our airports because our local police are prohibited from doing anything about it.
Nice. Wow. Before we get any more into the issues, because you got to get going soon, I did want to ask you about something that I heard you say on your 21 report, and it would relate to the transgender child abuse thing.
Yes.
The one you have on your issues list. So you said to Will Spencer, you said that basically masculinity has been pathologized. And I'm completely agreeing. I think that's correct. It's been pathologized by the American Psychological Association, by giant corporations like Gillette and Walmart and stuff like that. All these, in a million different ways over the past 10 years at minimum. It's been pathologized into toxic masculinity, this kind of disease. Mm-hmm. And then you said that the end conclusion of this, the end solution is to fix the disease. And I had not thought about that before because I obviously, monitor what feminists do a lot in movies and mainstream news and TV, all this crap, right? But I hadn't thought about it in those exact terms before, in that structure, that they're pathologizing something into a disease and then they want to fix it. And that was pretty brilliant. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? How does transgenderism, this transgender child abuse, basically relate to masculinity and to men in America? Why is it? What's the connection?
Yeah, so this first occurred to me when I was reading radical feminists who are equally opposed to the transgender ideology, right? The radfems are totally against it. And the reason they're totally against it is they never thought that pathologizing masculinity could ever be turned against girls, could never be turned against women.
An example would be like J.K. Rowling, right? She's one of
Yes,
the famous
exactly.
feminists fighting
Yeah,
against transgender
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
100%. And Jennifer Bilek would be another, who
Mm.
wrote several good books on this. So, so I was perplexing over, like, why can't these radical feminists see that it was the feminist critique of gender in the 70s and 80s that led to this? And what it was is they really believed that all of this went against the patriarchy. They really believed that. But what happened was when they successfully pathologized it and made it a medical and psychological issue, the scientific community, being a value-free inquiry into the facts, dispensed with the idea that it was about the patriarchy and applied medical criteria to it, medical and psychological criteria, rather than feminist gender criteria. And that meant then that girls could also be pathologized, and femininity could be something that has to be removed by total mastectomies on 13-year-old girls to turn them into quote unquote boys. Basically, it's on the level of the final solution. I mean, this is a holocaust of masculinity.
Wow.
They are going to medically eradicate masculinity, and they're intent on doing it. It's when you talk to these people, they're true believers. This isn't something that you may think is a passing fad. These people are true believers in this stuff, and they're fully intent on eradicating all forms of gender distinctions. And again, as I said earlier, when it's neutral, it will always be effeminate.
Yeah.
So it's a huge issue, and to the point where they're willing to take a 15-year-old boy like Jazz on I Am Jazz and cut his balls off and cut his penis off. They're willing to do that because they believe in this so much that him being a man is that toxic and that dangerous of a disease. They're willing to do that to a boy. And I'm telling you, if somebody's willing to do that kind of thing to a boy, I don't think there are any limits to what they'll
Yeah.
do. There are no
No,
limits to what they'll do.
I think you've put it very well. I know it might sound like hyperbole, but I don't think it is. I think it's very accurate. It's a holocaust of masculinity, and there's no limits. They have no
No,
boundaries, no borders,
no.
no limits. Right? They hate any kind of boundary or border or distinction. And the eradication of masculinity totally, I think, would be a good way to put their goal, as well as the family and all that, which stems from what? Patriarchy, aka masculinity through a
Yes.
father. So
Yes.
yeah, it's so
They,
sick what's happened in this country, man.
They've
Like,
effectively eliminated the father on all communities now, except among the rich. I mean, this is the one thing about these rich liberal elites that are doing this. They don't really suffer the effects of fatherlessness. They have fathers, right?
Hmm.
It's only the people in the upper middle classes down to the lower classes that have to deal with these family courts. It just doesn't happen. They don't have broken families at the top. So they don't really see the effects of this. But one thing they do know is that when you have broken families, they become dependent on the government. They
Yep.
lose economic and moral independence. And when the famous phrase, when you grab them by the balls, the hearts and minds follow. If you control rent and food for people, you can control how they vote, and you can control their social arrangements. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. It's dark times, man.
It's dark
It's
times. But the thing
the
is, it can't be defeated. In any time we're going to have a crisis, there'll be a resurgence of masculinity. Look at all the floods that happened in Louisiana. Masculinity was praised even on mainstream news stations, right? The fact is, it's just a matter of how many children will be harmed before the reset.
Yeah.
I've compared this to, the plane's going to crash. Yes. Question is, does it do a skid landing and we save most of the people on board, or does it dive, nose first into a massive explosion and kill everyone? We're really trying to just crash land in a safe way for the resurgence of masculinity. In the end, we will win. It's inevitable. We can't not win. It's only a question of how many people are going to get hurt in the meantime.
Michael Foster has a saying: "The patriarchy is inevitable."
It's inevitable.
Yeah, but I
There's
like the
no
way you're putting it.
way around it.
The crash is basically inevitable. The plane's going down,
That's
but
right.
it's what kind of landing are we going to have, and then maybe get people to
That's right.
safety, maybe get on a new plane, get back in the air.
Yes.
That's a I think a level-headed, optimistic view of the future. The plane's going to crash, but how is it going to crash, and what can we do to keep people safe and
That's right.
make a better future after that crash landing?
And if men
Yeah.
cooperate and can see through this propaganda and can cooperate and make a few changes in their own lives, a few changes in their own communities,
Mhm.
you can make a huge difference to what's going to happen in the future and how we're going to handle this tumultuous times that are coming. And I think it's going to. My sons are going to see this in their lifetime. So
Yeah. Well, Jeff, you're a man of action. You are putting your nose to the grindstone. You're putting your money where your mouth is. You are running to make real, tangible legislative change in your state where it matters to you most, and where you've been affected the most personally.
that's right.
You've been harmed by the government. You've been harmed by these policies. You've been harmed by the court system. You've been harmed by this whole multitude of bureaucracy, and you're now going to do something about it in a very tangible, financial, physical, legal,
That's right.
political way. Hell
That's
yeah.
right.
Everybody, make sure you support Jeff Younger. Check out his site, learn more about
Thanks.
him, send donations. Link is in the description. You can also visit, if you're listening on audio, jeffyoungerfortexas.com. And everything's there. You can learn all about him. He has a blog going too. It's pretty cool. I was reading yesterday on his blog about the structure of the Texas government. I learned some new things I did not know about how Texas operates. Lots of cool stuff. So check him out. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. Really
Always
appreciate
good
you.
talking to you, man.
Yeah, this whole year getting to know you has just been awesome. 2021, one of my
Same here,
favorite
brother.
guys by far.
Yeah. Thanks.
Everybody else, thanks for tuning in to Redman Group. See you probably next weekend on Saturday, episode 153. Peace out. Visit the link. Support Jeff. Thank you very much. Stay red pilled. Stay frosty.